I want to bring in Mollie Hemingway now, Fox News contributor and editor-in-chief of The Federalist. Mollie, a sovereign nation taking the pressure of nearly 2 million people coming in and being arrested. Your top-line thoughts.
One of the things that makes a country a sovereign nation is having a border, and we don't really have a southern border. These numbers are shocking, but they're not surprising in another way, because even since before President Biden was elected, he has encouraged this type of trafficking of humans, opening up the border, which means all sorts of things like dramatic increases in the number of illegal drugs that are crossing the border, the exploitation of humans who want to get across the border. It's a real humanitarian crisis. It's also a crisis of just whether or not we're a country, because we really don't have that southern border.
So tell me what you make of this ongoing feud now between Mayor Adams of New York City and the governor of Texas in different places where he is busing these illegals, giving America a taste of what's going on that really has overwhelmed cities and states along our U.S. border with Mexico.
And you've seen this also with Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who claimed that she was very open to widespread illegal immigration and has now been sounding the alarm since some of these buses are also arriving in Washington, D.C. This is just a small taste of what happens when you have an uncontrolled border with, millions of people crossing it who are illegally in the country or illegally staying in the country. I think, it's a tactic to use to help people become aware of all the problems caused by the federal government not maintaining a border, but it doesn't do nearly enough. The federal government needs to do what it had done for a few years in the previous administration, which was start to get control of that southern border.
I want to talk about a picture that's up side by side with you right now. You may or may not be able to see this, but the words that we have at the bottom of the screen don't completely reflect what's happening there because we don't have enough room. So let me fill in the blanks again. That was a human smuggler car chase that was going on with Texas law enforcement, people bailing out of that vehicle. This is not a simple case, Mollie, of people going to the checkpoints and trying to get into this country. And Democrats want to paint it that way, that they're more heart-filled because they're willing to help the people who are coming here legitimately. First of all, we have to vet that. And I don't care how much vetting you do, bailing out of a vehicle with cops chasing you doesn't look like you want to come here the right way.
And Harris, it is so much worse than even that. I mean, there's a criminal cartel that is essentially running our neighbor state of Mexico, and they are committing human rights atrocities every day. The exploitation of these millions of people who are being promised things by cartels in exchange for huge amounts of money that they don't have. There are, widespread issues of rape and assault and killings and all of these problems. There is nothing humanitarian about not having control of the border. And it's also worth noting that Merrick Garland is doing nothing to secure the border, even as he's running criminal prosecutions of his political opponents, going after parents at school boards, which is one of the reasons why he is almost certainly going to be impeached pretty close to day one when Republicans take over.
Well, look, we're not going to get into this, but we all know that the AG of the United States, Merrick Garland's a little, preoccupied right now trying to figure out how to keep that affidavit, which let the search go on at Trump's house, under seal. So he's a little busy right now, you might say. I'm being facetious. All right, 2 million. Let's put that number into context now. Let's pop some stuff up on the screen that we looked at today. So we're on track to have 2 million people arrested coming into this country. That's the equivalent to the entire population of the state of New Mexico. It's the equivalent to all of the people we have in our nation's prisons and jails. And with people watching from 50 states, this number probably would be low. But it's estimated that about 2 million viewers on average watch an NBA game. That is the equivalent of the people that we have let come across our border, not to mention all those gotaways. We don't even know where they are, and they are not in that number.
Right, it actually underestimates how many people are coming because of those gotaways. And, New York and Washington, D.C. are making a big production about how they're having to handle some of this illegal immigration. But this is what people in small towns and smaller cities throughout the country have had to be dealing with, which are lots of constraints on public funds, lots of increases in crime or other issues that can be attendant with this type of mass movement. And this is what American people have been dealing with and have been begging their political leaders to address for decades. And with very few exceptions in the previous administration, this hasn't been done for decades. But again, you don't have a country if you don't have a meaningful border and you don't have security. We have a lot of people who care a lot about other countries' borders and securing other countries' borders. But they don't seem to care about our own border, even, not refusing to give money to make sure there is security, refusing to give money so that we can properly police things, but giving tons of money in other countries throughout the world for the precise same thing.
Well, and you're talking follow the money. I'm going to follow the money too and see if these blue city leaders get the kind of cash and the federal help that others along the border in states like Arizona and Texas have not been able to get. They haven't gotten that support. I'll follow that money and report on that, as I'm sure you will as well. All right, President Biden set to take a break from his vacation to sign that massive tax hike and spending bill today. They can call it Inflation Reduction Act, but we know that that's not true because it's negligible in its effects on inflation. It will, however, double the size of the Internal Revenue Service, sparking massive audit anxiety now. The White House insisting the effects won't affect everyday Americans. But a former IRS whistleblower says that's not true. The idea that they're going to go after these big billionaires and large corporations is quite frankly BS. This is a quote. Those billionaires are probably sitting back laughing right now. And new op-ed sums it up with this headline: the IRS hires agents, not angels. Wow. Adding taxpayers fear audits for a reason, even if they've done nothing wrong. Reagan economic advisor Art Laffer on the Focus yesterday.
They're here to rip you off. And that's why they're doing it, and that's why they're spending all of this money. And it's going to cost you and people below the billionaire levels a lot of money on trying to defend themselves from these types of audits. And it's going to cause a lot of anxiety. When you see that letter come in, Harris, IRS audit notice, it sends your blood pressure through the ceiling.
Mollie, your reaction?
Well, wealthy corporations and individuals definitely have the means and have always had the means to protect themselves against intrusive audits and other bureaucratic regulations that come from the federal government. It is ludicrous to pretend that this hiring of 87,000 agents, and the arming of these IRS agents is being done to go after wealthy corporations or wealthy individuals. It's to go after average Americans, and it's part of an orchestrated campaign to kind of target Americans and have the federal government be at war with those Americans. It is interesting that this so-called Inflation Reduction Act, I saw a poll showing that only 15% believed that it would reduce inflation, and that makes sense because there's nothing in the bill that would reduce inflation.
Real quickly, how does this play politically going in 84 days into the midterm elections? If people are fearful of this, and it's tied to their bottom line, how does that play for the people on the left who think that this is a good idea to hire all those agents? And by the way, the amount of ammo they're going to have, 5 million rounds. Lock and load, they're ready to come and audit.
I think it actually just points to the difference between Republicans and Democrats. When Democrats know that they're about to face heavy electoral losses, they seem emboldened to pass whatever legislation they can in the period of time that they do have power, whereas Republicans have historically not used their power in a way that makes their voters happy. It'll be interesting to see whether this new crop of Republicans that's coming in, we're seeing in the primaries today and what we've already experienced in the election in November, they'll probably be much more responsive to Americans' desire that actual things be done to rein in the federal government and its attacks on American people.
That's an interesting observation. We'll watch for that too. Mollie Hemingway, thank you.